They say that in every family, someone goes unseen. In the Rivers family, that person was Caleb. Not forgotten in the tragic way, no locked attic, no cruel punishments. Just the quieter form of neglect, the kind that silences you in plain sight. The kind that tells you without words, you don't matter here. Caleb grew up sandwiched between two extremes. His older brother Julian was the crown prince, varsity athlete, debate team captain, the one who got standing ovations at Thanksgiving dinner just for clearing his throat. His younger sister Lila was the adored prodigy, ballet trophies, straight A's, and a laugh that made their mother cry from joy. And Caleb? He was the one who passed the potatoes. He had learned early not to interrupt. Not to speak unless spoken to. Not to share his ideas unless he was willing to be laughed at, or worse, dismissed like background noise. He remembered once, when he was 9, spending 3 whole weeks making a handmade card game. He'd drawn every card by hand, crafted rules, and even laminated them with packing tape. He called it Riddle Run, a game where players had to solve puzzles to escape traps in a magical castle. He wrapped the deck in tissue paper, wrote to the family in careful, blocky print, and presented it after dinner. His mom smiled for half a second before setting it on the table beside the dishes. Julian was too busy talking about his scholarship interview. Lila asked if they could play Monopoly instead. The game disappeared sometime the next week. Probably into the trash. He never mentioned it again. By the time he reached college, Caleb had become a ghost at family gatherings. He showed up when required, stayed quiet, smiled politely. Every Christmas, they exchanged gifts. Julian got cufflinks and cashmere. Lila got limited edition makeup palettes or tickets to see Swan Lake. Caleb got bookstore gift cards or things clearly were wrapped from someone else's returns. He didn't complain. He just saved every card. Every offhand comment. Every time someone said, "We thought you wouldn't care," or "Oh, we didn't think to ask you." He didn't care about revenge. But he did care about being seen. It was 3 years ago when the moment finally cracked him open. It was their annual Rivers family summer celebration, a tradition started by their grandfather who once ran a chain of hotels and loved things that felt classy. Every year, they'd rent out a room at the high-end Kingford Country Club. It was all champagne and catered hors d'oeuvres, live jazz and polite applause. It was boring as hell. That year, Caleb decided to speak up. They were sitting in the Rivers living room, their parents on the leather couch, Julian sprawled on the floor like a prince awaiting praise, Lila painting her nails, her phone lighting up every few seconds with Instagram notifications. Caleb cleared his throat. No one looked up. "I was thinking," he said, "what if we did something different this year for the family celebration?" Julian raised a brow without lifting his head. "Different like what?" "Like renting a cabin near the lake. Bonfires, board games, music, real food. Something relaxed. Actually fun." A pause. Then Lila snorted. "Sure, Caleb. You know lake houses aren't exactly cheap, right?" Caleb's heart ticked. "Actually, they're half the cost of the country club. I checked." Whoa, Julian interrupted with a chuckle. "So you want to plan it? Gonna foot the bill too?" Their mom took a slow sip of wine. "It's sweet that you want to contribute, honey, but these things take planning. It's not as simple as booking a cabin." Their father didn't even glance up from his phone. "Let the grown-ups handle this, Caleb." And just like that, his words evaporated. It wasn't anger that filled him in that moment. It was clarity. He sat back in his chair and nodded. "You're right." He let them return to their talking. He listened to Lila rant about a broken nail, to Julian brag about a golf game with his boss, to his parents debate which wine to serve at the country club. But his mind was already somewhere else. "Fine," he thought. "If you only care about my voice when I'm paying for something. Then one day, I'll make sure you'll have to listen." He didn't know how yet. But he knew he'd find a way. And when that day came, they wouldn't just want his ideas. They'd want his money. He would remember that evening for a long time. Not for the sting, it didn't sting anymore. Not like it used to. He had grown numb to their disregard. No, he remembered it because it was the night he made a silent vow to himself. He wasn't going to earn their approval. He was going to earn power. Not to control them. But to free himself. To walk into the same room years later and choose whether or not to respond. To become someone who could give them what they wanted, or not. Not because he was cruel. But because he mattered. And they were going to learn that, with interest. After that night in the Rivers living room, the night of polite laughs and glassy-eyed dismissal, Caleb stopped trying. He no longer offered ideas. No more family emails with fun suggestions. No more birthday cards that included personal notes or inside jokes. He simply showed up when required, brought generic wine, and faded into the furniture. The Rivers family didn't notice the difference. They never had. What they didn't know, what they never cared enough to ask, was what Caleb was doing with all that silence. While Julian climbed corporate ladders at his father's old brokerage firm and Lila polished her influencer profile between brand deals and tanning appointments, Caleb was building something in the background. Something invisible. Something that didn't need applause to grow. It started in 2017. A college roommate had introduced him to cryptocurrency. At first, Caleb laughed it off. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, it all sounded like monopoly money wrapped in tech jargon. But he was curious. So, while the world laughed or panicked, he read. He stayed up late watching market behavior, learning about blockchains, DeFi protocols, and gas fees. He studied crashes and recoveries, kept Excel spreadsheets, followed anonymous developers on obscure forums. In 2018, when the markets dipped and headlines screamed crypto bubble bursts, Caleb did something no one in his family would have expected. He bought. Not recklessly. Not emotionally. He used savings from his IT job, the little freelance gigs he picked up on weekends, and what he had quietly earned through modest software consulting gigs. While his family thought he was just messing around with computers, he was taking calculated risks, buying Ethereum at lows, staking tokens, flipping NFT projects before they were mainstream, and investing early in decentralized apps. Then came the bull run in 2021. His modest portfolio multiplied into 6 figures. Then into 7. He didn't celebrate. Didn't buy a Tesla. Didn't tweet about making it. He just kept working. He hired a financial advisor. Diversified into green energy startups. Bought a modest condo under an LLC. Took a few small, silent vacations to places that soothed him, quiet lakes, old cities, seaside cafes where no one knew his name. He had made it, but no one knew. Not his family, certainly. They didn't ask. They still assumed he was some kind of glorified tech support guy, clicking away in a dark basement somewhere. Doing his little computer thing, as Lila once put it while sipping oat milk lattes at brunch. And Caleb was happy to keep it that way. Until the day it slipped. He ran into Derek, an old acquaintance from high school, at a coffee shop downtown. Derek had once been one of Julian's loud friends, the kind who called Caleb quiet guy because he couldn't remember his name. But Derek recognized him instantly. Caleb? He said, squinting. No way, dude. It's been forever. You look good. What are you up to these days? Caleb offered a polite smile. Just working in software. Low-key stuff. Derek chuckled. Man, I heard you did something with crypto. Like, big. Caleb hesitated. I did okay. Derek leaned in, eyes wide. No. Ryan told me. You were in early, right? Like before it popped? Dude, are you rich? Caleb shrugged, brushing past the question. But the seed had been planted. A week later, it began. Lila's text arrived first. Lila, wait. Are you actually loaded? Ryan said you made bank with crypto. WTF, Caleb? He didn't answer. Then Julian called. He never called. Hey, bro, Julian said, his voice too casual. Quick thing, how much did you make, anyway? Like, enough to buy a house? Caleb smiled slightly. Something like that. Julian laughed. Man, you could have told us. We're family, right? Family, he thought. Funny how that word always showed up when they wanted something. He thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. A few days later, he got the text from their mother. Mom, dinner at ours on Sunday. Just family, just family. Caleb stared at the message for a long time before replying. Caleb, sure. I'll bring dessert. Sunday came. The house was clean, unusually so. Their mother wore pearls. Their father looked up from his paper when Caleb entered, which in itself felt like a rare solar event. Lila was off her phone, and Julian had even helped set the table. Red flag number 1, everyone was too nice. The meal was steak, roasted vegetables, wine. His mother kept filling his plate. His father asked about his projects. Julian asked if Caleb had ever thought of opening his own company. Lila complimented his shirt, which was a plain black tee from a discount store. Halfway through, Julian cleared his throat. So, the summer celebration, he began. Caleb set down his fork. We were thinking, his mother added, maybe it's time to take it up a notch this year. Really go all out. Lila leaned forward. Like a beach resort. Or even a private yacht. And, Julian said, grinning, since you're doing so well. Caleb leaned back. Let me guess, you want me to pay for it? They laughed nervously. It's just a gesture, their mother said. You wanted to be included, didn't you? Their father added. Well, this is your chance. Caleb looked at them all, the same people who had ignored him, talked over him, left him out. And he smiled. You know what? He said. You're right. Their faces lit up. I'll take care of everything. Lila squealed. This is going to be epic. He took out his phone, booked the most expensive venue he could find, and emailed them the details. There you go, he said, pushing the phone across the table. Your dream celebration, handled. They cheered. Toasted. Clinked glasses. They had no idea what was coming. This wasn't a gift. It was a lesson. And class was about to begin. The estate Caleb booked for the Rivers family celebration sat on 5 acres of private coastal property. Ocean on one side, vineyards on the other. It had everything, a private chef, 3 mixologists, a string quartet for cocktail hour, and a full jazz band for the evening. There were hand-delivered welcome baskets in every suite, chocolates, monogrammed robes, custom key cards. Nothing was spared. It was a spectacle. And every dime was paid in full by Caleb. But it wasn't for their enjoyment. It was a mirror. One they would be forced to look into. He arrived late on purpose. He wanted to see them before they saw him. He slipped in through the garden path, avoiding the main entrance, blending in with the murmurs of expensive conversations. From behind a hydrangea hedge, he watched it unfold. Julian stood at the bar, gesturing with his glass. He really went with this band? I mean, they're decent, but there's a sax player I know who would have killed this. Lila sat under the pergola, raising her champagne flute to the light. This isn't Dom Perignon. Is this seriously all they had? His mother hovered near the hors d'oeuvres, poking a canapé with visible disdain. Do you taste this? I told them no horseradish. His father stood with arms crossed, watching a waiter walk past with shrimp skewers. You'd think for this price they'd get better help. This kid just walked by me twice. Not one thank you. Not one compliment. They were in paradise, and all they could do was complain. Caleb stepped into view and cleared his throat. Their heads turned. Oh my God, Caleb. Lila's face lit up like a New Year's firework. This is incredible. Yeah man, seriously, Julian said, clapping him on the back. Didn't know you had taste like this. His mother swooped in with a kiss on the cheek. You really outdid yourself, sweetheart. His father nodded, which from him, counted as a standing ovation. Caleb just smiled. Glad you're enjoying it. Inside, he wasn't surprised. This was the test. And they were failing. As the evening wore on, the mask started to slip. Julian cornered him near the wine cellar. So. Listen, he began, swirling his drink. I've been thinking. Since you're doing so well now, maybe you could spot me something. Just a little float, like 20, 30 grand. Nothing crazy. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Alone? Yeah, Julian said. You've got it, right? It's not like you'll miss it. Before Caleb could answer, Lila appeared from nowhere, already mid-sentence. And I found the perfect apartment in Brentwood. Like, gorgeous. But the deposit is insane. You could totally help me out, right? Big bro to the rescue? Neither looked embarrassed. They were lining up like customers at an ATM. Caleb kept his expression calm. I'll think about it. That night, his parents approached him during dessert. His mother placed a gentle hand on his arm, eyes glassy with artificial warmth. Caleb, your father and I have been talking. Retirement's getting tougher than we expected. Investments, medical stuff. You know how it is. We were hoping, his father added, you might help out a bit. We supported you all those years, after all. All those years. Caleb nearly laughed. The same people who ignored his college major. The ones who forgot his birthday 3 years in a row. The ones who once told him his coding stuff wasn't a real career. Now they wanted him to step up. He nodded slowly. Of course. I'd love to help. Their faces bloomed with relief. Just one thing, he added. It's all going to be in writing. 3 days later, Contracts were signed. Julian received $30,000. Lila got her $12,000 deposit. His parents got a transfer large enough to cover a year of mortgage payments and expenses. Every agreement was clear: repayment schedules, interest rates, legal obligations. Witnessed by Caleb's lawyer, notarized, archived. They all signed without hesitation. Because why read fine print when you think the guy across the table will always say yes? The repayments began the next month. Or rather, they didn't. Julian missed his first deadline. Caleb sent a friendly reminder. Caleb, hey, just checking in. First loan payment was due on the 1st. Let me know when you've sent it. 3 days later, Julian finally responded. Julian, yeah, things are tight this month. I'll hit you next month. Cool? Caleb replied with one line. Caleb, read the contract. Julian called him within 5 minutes. Dude, are you seriously going to make me follow that legal crap? We're family. Yes, Caleb said. Because that's how loans work. You're being petty, Julian snapped. You've got money to burn. Why does this matter? If it's just money, Caleb said evenly, why don't you have it? Silence. You've got 2 options. Pay what you owe. Or deal with the legal fallout. Julian hung up. Lila ignored him entirely. No texts. No emails. No payments. Until she received a notice of default from his attorney. That night she called, sobbing. You're taking me to court? Over this? You're rich, Caleb. I thought it was a gift. No, he said. You signed. You agreed. You chose not to pay. You tricked me. I treated you like an adult, he said. You just didn't act like one. She paid the next morning. His parents were worse. They didn't respond directly at all. Instead, they organized a family meeting. When Caleb arrived, he walked into the Rivers home to find Julian and Lila already seated, arms crossed like rebellious teens. His mom stirred her tea with theatrical solemnity. His dad glared from the head of the table. You've gone too far, his mom said. This is family. Families don't sue each other. Caleb leaned against the doorway. Families don't treat one member like a ghost until they need something. You're punishing us, his father growled. No, Caleb said. I'm mirroring you. Julian scoffed. This is why no one respected you growing up. Caleb turned to him. Excuse me? You've always been petty. You think this changes that? You're still the same loser who never got invited to anything. Caleb didn't speak. He just reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and hit send. All of their phones buzzed at once. They looked down. Ashley gasped. You didn't. Julian's face drained of color. You're insane. His mother clutched her phone like it had burned her. Caleb, how could you? It was a final demand for payment. Deadline, 14 days. Failure to comply would trigger formal litigation. They tried everything: tears, guilt, back-channel calls from cousins, even a vague letter from a family friend. Caleb didn't budge. One by one, they paid. Julian, begrudgingly. Half now, half in monthly chunks. Lila, furious, but prompt, afraid of a court record. His parents, humiliated, but obedient. They couldn't afford the scandal. And when the final payment cleared, Caleb blocked them all. He didn't want revenge. He wanted closure. And now, for the first time in his life, he had it. The day the final payment cleared, Caleb sat at his desk in the corner of his apartment, sipping black coffee and watching the cursor blink on a blank email draft. He had planned to write something. Maybe a final word. Maybe a closure note that politely explained why he was disappearing from their lives. But after staring at the screen for 10 minutes, he closed the window. He didn't owe them words. He had given them contracts. That was enough. It had been nearly 3 months since the showdown, the intervention they staged, the tears, the guilt, the accusations of betrayal. It had all ended with payment confirmations and closed bank transfers. One by one, they repaid their debts, not out of honor, but out of fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of lawsuits. Fear of finally being held accountable by the person they never thought would matter. Caleb blocked them all after the last transaction. No calls. No texts. No social media access. He erased the Rivers family like erasing a whiteboard, clean, final, satisfying. At first, he thought the silence would feel hollow. After all, they were his family. Blood, history, all that. Even if they'd ignored him for years, they'd still been there. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every major life moment, even if he'd stood in the back of the photos, slightly off-center, always half-shadowed. But after the first week? He felt lighter. He didn't miss the tension. The passive-aggressive digs. The orchestrated events where he was expected to smile, pay, or stay silent. Now, there were no expectations. No carefully worded texts asking him to help out just this once. No calls asking if he could talk to someone about refinancing something. No guilt-tripped dinners where the wine flowed but no one remembered what he did for a living. There was only peace. Caleb began focusing on things that had long taken a backseat to family obligations. He traveled. He flew to Switzerland and stayed in a mountain cabin where he woke to sunrises that painted the snow gold. He spent a month in Kyoto, learning calligraphy from a retired monk. He wandered through markets in Istanbul and learned to cook from street vendors who didn't speak his language but communicated in flavor and laughter. He reconnected with old college friends. People who had always seen him as Caleb, not a role, not a wallet, not a mistake waiting to be corrected. He took up music again. The guitar he'd once shoved in a closet after Lila called it annoying background noise now sat in his living room, strings well worn from nightly use. He played not for anyone, but for himself. He even started attending open mic nights, quietly becoming a local favorite. He invested, not just financially, but emotionally. He mentored 2 high school kids interested in tech. He donated anonymously to schools lacking STEM programs. He even helped fund a shelter for young adults aging out of foster care, kids who, like him, had been overlooked or told they didn't matter. But the difference? They didn't have to earn his help. They just had to exist. Occasionally, messages still came. Blocked numbers. Burner accounts. Mutual acquaintances trying to build bridges. One text, sent from a number not saved in his contacts, simply read: "Family is forever. We love you. Please come home." He didn't respond. Because the truth was, he had no home with them anymore. His home was in the silence he chose. The boundaries he built. The peace he protected. Then, one day, he heard from Rebecca, his cousin on his mother's side. They had been close when they were kids, before family politics and passive rivalries drove them apart. She reached out via LinkedIn, of all places, with a short message. "Hey. I heard things went down. Just wanted to say I always saw you. I'm sorry I never said it." He stared at that message for a long time. Then he replied, "Thank you. That means more than you know." They met for lunch the next week. It was the first time in years someone from his family sat across from him without asking for anything. No strings. No expectations. Just conversation. The stories trickled in slowly after that. Lila had lost the apartment. Apparently, the rent was too high, and the influencer gigs weren't covering her bills anymore. She moved back in with their parents. Julian's car had been repossessed after he fell behind on payments. His job was unstable, and word was spreading about his entitlement issues, which didn't sit well in the finance world. His parents were still trying to hold court at social functions, but people had started asking questions about the closed accounts, the missing donations, the whispers of a falling out with their son. Caleb didn't feel vindicated. He felt numb. Not cold. Not smug. Just done. For the first time, he realized that peace doesn't always come with a grand declaration. Sometimes it just shows up when you stop waiting to be invited. One night, sitting on his balcony with a cup of tea, Caleb wrote in a journal he'd recently started keeping. "I used to think the worst thing was being invisible. But now I think the worst thing is being seen only for what you can give. They didn't miss me. They missed what I used to offer. And when that went away, so did they. I thought cutting them off would leave a hole. But it didn't. It left space. And now, finally, I get to choose what to fill it with." He put the journal away, stood up, and looked out at the city lights. There was no rage in him. No resentment. No need for revenge. Just freedom. And the knowledge that walking away hadn't made him cruel. It had made him whole. It had been 6 months since Caleb Rivers had cut his family off for good. 6 months of silence. Of peace. Of freedom so unfamiliar, he hadn't realized how deeply he'd been craving it until it arrived. He hadn't spoken to Julian. Hadn't seen Lila's curated online life or his parents' forced holiday newsletters. The numbers were blocked. The addresses muted. The inbox filters airtight. And yet, Sometimes, the past still tried to crawl under the door. It started with a voicemail. A trembling voice he hadn't heard in months, his mother. "Caleb, sweetheart. We don't understand why you're doing this. You've always been sensitive, but this is too far. We're your parents. We love you. Please. Call us back. Come home." The message ended with his father's voice chiming in at the last second. "You're being unreasonable. Call your mother." Click. He stared at the phone. Didn't play it again. Didn't save it. Just deleted it. Because here was the truth. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just done. The final straw hadn't been the money. It wasn't the false smiles at the party. It wasn't the contracts, the pleading, or even the betrayal. It was the realization that none of them ever truly wanted to know him. Not Caleb the thinker. Not Caleb the artist. Not Caleb the man who learned to build peace in silence. They only saw him once he became useful. And now that he'd taken that utility away, they didn't see him at all. A week after the voicemail, a letter arrived. Not from his parents. From Julian. Handwritten. Sloppy penmanship, rushed. "Bro. Okay. You made your point. We all messed up, okay? But family's family. Can we move past this? No hard feelings. We're still your people. You've got the money, the life. Great. Congrats. But let's not pretend that cuts us off completely. We're still Rivers. Blood is blood. J." Caleb didn't reply. Instead, he wrote something in his journal that night. "Blood is biology. But love? Love is action. Presence. And for years, they showed me who they were. I just finally believed them." Then came Lila's attempt. An Instagram story. A blurry photo of the two of them at some family function years ago, him half out of frame, a cupcake in one hand. Captioned. "Miss this. Miss him. Family first." He didn't respond. Not publicly. Not privately. He wasn't interested in image repair. He was interested in truth. And the truth was, she hadn't missed him. She missed what he could buy. Meanwhile, Caleb's life blossomed. He finished building a small nonprofit tech school in the city, an idea he'd quietly worked on for years. It offered scholarships and free certification courses to underprivileged youth and returning veterans. The first class was already halfway through. He kept traveling, simpler now. Less flashy. More meaningful. Hiking trails. Cozy bookstores. Cafes where no one knew his name. He met someone, too. At a book signing, of all places. Her name was Mira. She was a quiet woman with ink-stained hands and a voice that was soft but certain. She asked him what he did, and when he gave a vague answer about software and education, she didn't push. She just smiled and said, "Sounds like you're building something good." That was enough. They'd been dating for 2 months now. She didn't care about the money. She liked his slow way of speaking, the calmness in his eyes. She didn't ask him to be more than what he already was. It was new. And it was real. One night, as they were walking home from a poetry reading, Mira asked, "Do you think they'll ever really understand what they lost?" Caleb paused under a street lamp, hands in his coat pockets. "They might," he said. "Does that matter to you?" He smiled faintly. "Not anymore. Because that was the secret no one told you about letting go. It didn't always end with a confrontation. Sometimes it just ended. And what was left behind wasn't bitterness. It was space. Room for new laughter. New holidays. New definitions of family. Room for Mira. For music. For peace. For Caleb." On the 1-year anniversary of the family fallout, Caleb did something he hadn't done in a long time. He returned to the Rivers house. Not to speak. Not to reunite. Just to see it. It was smaller than he remembered. The porch light flickered. The garden looked a little unkempt. The energy, once buzzing with pride and ambition, now seemed faded, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. He didn't knock. He stood at the curb for a few minutes. Then he turned, got back in his car, and drove away. He had no need to revisit it again. The past had shaped him, yes. But it didn't own him. Back at home, he poured a cup of tea, opened his laptop, and reviewed applications for the next round of scholarships. There was a note from a kid named Leo. 17. Grew up in the foster system. Wanted to build video games to help kids deal with anxiety. His essay ended with, "No one's ever really listened to me before. I just want to build something that makes people feel seen. Caleb stared at those words. Then he hit approve. He didn't need a parade. He didn't need revenge. He just needed to know that somewhere, someone would feel what he never got to feel as a child. Seen. Heard. Valued. And he would keep giving that, quietly, consistently, not because anyone owed him anything, but because he had learned how powerful it is when someone finally chooses themselves.